Ladies and gentlemen, there is a power inside each of us more potent than any storm. A power that, when mastered, can shape the course of our lives, elevate us to greatness, or, if neglected, can drag us into ruin. That power is emotion. You see, every triumph, every defeat, every bold step, and every missed opportunity, we can trace them back to the way we felt in the moment. Anger, fear, doubt, excitement, love. These are not just feelings. They are forces. They either work for us or against us. But make no mistake, they are never neutral. Emotions are powerful forces that operate beneath the surface of every thought, decision, and interaction we experience. They are invisible currents that influence the direction of our lives in ways we often underestimate. Whether it's the fire of anger, the chill of fear, the weight of sadness, or the lift of joy, emotions color our perception and shape the choices we make. Every human action, from the smallest gesture to the boldest life-altering decision, carries with it the imprint of a feeling. And because emotions are so deeply woven into our internal experience, we often fail to recognize just how much control they have until it's too late. Think about the last time you said something you regretted, or the last time you walked away from an opportunity that intimidated you. In both cases, it wasn't logic that drove your behavior. It was emotion. It was that flash of irritation, that wave of insecurity, or that pang of self-doubt. Emotions rise quickly and powerfully. They can hijack rational thought, override careful planning, and push you into impulsive behavior that might not reflect your values or long-term goals. This is why emotional awareness and control are not optional. They are essential skills for anyone who wants to live a conscious, purposeful life. Emotions are not inherently bad. In fact, they are part of what makes life rich and meaningful. Joy connects us to gratitude. Love gives us a sense of belonging. Even fear has its place. It alerts us to danger and urges caution. The problem arises when emotions are not balanced by reflection. When we allow our inner storms to dictate our external behavior, we give up control of our lives. We become reactionary instead of intentional. We get stuck in cycles of regret, frustration, and confusion, wondering why we continue to make choices that hurt us or hold us back. This emotional power is not only reactive, it is creative. Emotions fuel motivation. They inspire action. When channeled wisely, feelings can be the source of tremendous strength. Anger, when transformed, becomes courage to confront injustice. Fear, when faced, becomes fuel for growth. Passion, when disciplined, becomes purpose. But without control, these same emotions can become destructive. The very things that could lift us can also bring us down. Because emotions are always present, whether we acknowledge them or not, they become the silent drivers of our habits, our relationships, and our perception of reality. People often think they are making logical decisions, but more often than not, those decisions are already shaped by how they feel in the moment. Even our interpretation of facts is filtered through emotion. What we choose to focus on, what we remember, and how we perceive others, all of these are colored by our emotional state. To deny the influence of emotions is to ignore one of the most influential elements of human behavior. And yet, many people go through life unaware of how their feelings are directing their choices. They let anger speak for them. They let fear silence them. They let fleeting feelings create lasting consequences. When feelings are left unchecked, they become rulers instead of messengers. Emotions are meant to inform us, to give us feedback about the world and our place in it. But when we allow them to take the wheel, they begin to shape our behavior in ways that undermine our goals, damage our relationships, and strip away our sense of inner stability. The inability to control emotion leads to impulsive reactions, reactions that may feel justified in the moment, but often result in regret, misunderstanding, or missed opportunities. Emotional chaos is not a sign of passion. It is a sign of surrendering the most valuable form of personal power, self-government. Lack of emotional control often shows up in moments of stress, conflict, or uncertainty. A person might lash out in anger and say words they can never take back. Another may shut down from anxiety, refusing to act when action is most needed. The problem isn't the anger or the fear. It's the fact that the person didn't choose their response. They were led by a feeling rather than guiding that feeling toward a constructive direction. This is the subtle, dangerous shift from being in control to being controlled. And it rarely happens all at once. It's a gradual erosion of clarity and intention that eventually becomes a pattern. These patterns, once formed, become deeply ingrained. A person who continually acts on emotion without pause becomes reactive, volatile, and unpredictable. Their life begins to mirror the instability of their feelings. They may find themselves in constant conflict, unable to build or maintain trust in relationships, or caught in cycles of failure and disappointment that seem to repeat without explanation. Often they externalize the blame on people, situations, or circumstances, never recognizing that the common denominator is not the world around them, but the emotional storm within them. What makes emotional control so critical is that every major aspect of life, career, relationships, personal growth, requires consistent, deliberate action. And consistent action cannot happen without emotional discipline. Someone who is driven by how they feel in the moment will struggle to maintain focus, follow through on commitments, or stay resilient in the face of adversity. A person might start a project with enthusiasm, but abandon it the first time motivation dips. Or they may enter a relationship full of love, only to sabotage it when insecurity or jealousy takes over. In each case, the emotion dictates the outcome. In environments where composure is needed most, such as leadership, crisis management, or high-stakes decision-making, the person who cannot regulate their emotions becomes a liability. Others may lose trust in their judgment, question their stability, or hesitate to rely on them during critical moments. Emotional volatility can not only harm personal reputation, but also affect team dynamics, performance, and long-term opportunity. In this way, uncontrolled emotion becomes a quiet, persistent form of self-destruction. Not dramatic, not always visible to others, but deeply erosive to confidence, potential, and inner peace. Emotional mastery is not about suppressing or denying how we feel. It is about recognizing the emotion, understanding its source, and choosing how to respond rather than being swept away by it. This ability to manage emotion is one of the highest forms of personal power. When someone learns to pause before reacting, to interpret feelings without being ruled by them, they begin to take control of their inner world. From that control comes a kind of strength that is not loud or showy, but unshakable. It is the strength to stay calm in chaos, steady in conflict, and clear in confusion. Most people believe that power lies in what we can control outside of ourselves, status, wealth, circumstances. But real power begins internally. The person who can remain level-headed while others panic, who can choose patience when provoked or maintain optimism in the face of adversity, holds a kind of influence that cannot be easily shaken. This is the quiet authority of someone who has mastered themselves. When you own your emotions, you also own your decisions. You stop being reactive and start being intentional. And intentional action rooted in clarity and calm leads to far more effective results than impulse-driven behavior. Emotional mastery gives you the freedom to operate from your principles rather than your moods. You can honor your commitments, even when you don't feel like it. You can offer kindness, even when irritation tempts you otherwise. This consistency builds self-respect and earns the respect of others. People naturally trust those who are emotionally balanced because they are predictable in the best way. They don't lose control under pressure. They don't let emotion cloud judgment, and they don't let the highs or lows of life throw them off course. Their power lies in their reliability. In contrast, a person who has not developed emotional control often lives at the mercy of circumstances. If the day goes well, they're happy. If things go wrong, they spiral. Their emotions rise and fall with external events, and as a result, they feel constantly pushed and pulled, unsure of their direction. But with emotional mastery, the environment has less power over you. You are able to respond rather than react, to lead yourself even when everything around you is uncertain. This is how clarity is maintained in complexity, and how progress is made regardless of temporary discomfort. The impact of emotional control extends far beyond personal success. It affects how you communicate, how you connect with others, and how you influence the world around you. When you are in control of your emotions, you create space for others to feel safe, seen, and heard. You listen better, you speak more thoughtfully, you diffuse tension instead of escalating it. This emotional steadiness becomes a foundation for trust, both in relationships and in leadership. It's not about becoming emotionless, it's about becoming emotionally wise, emotionally strong, emotionally free. Because once you are no longer a prisoner of your impulses, you begin to lead your life from a place of purpose rather than reaction. In times of adversity, emotions run high. Fear tells you to quit, frustration urges you to blame, anxiety clouds your judgment. Without emotional discipline, these feelings become commands rather than signals. They begin to drive behavior and decision-making, leading to impulsive choices, avoidance of risk, or premature surrender. But when a person is emotionally disciplined, they can acknowledge those emotions without obeying them. They observe the fear but still take action. They feel the frustration but continue the process. They recognize the anxiety but don't allow it to paralyze them. This self-command is what allows for forward momentum when others stop. Some of the most important decisions in life and business are made under pressure. They are made when time is limited, stakes are high, and emotions are intense. In such moments, emotional discipline becomes a competitive advantage. It allows for clear thinking, better communication, and strategic action. It prevents rash decisions made in anger, fear-based inaction, or emotional outbursts that damage credibility. Leaders, entrepreneurs, artists, and innovators who achieve at the highest level are not immune to emotion. They have simply trained themselves to manage it. They understand that enduring success requires a stable foundation, and that foundation is built from within. Every obstacle carries emotional weight. The disappointment of a failed attempt, the criticism from others, the discomfort of uncertainty, all these experiences stir emotions that, if unchecked, can derail progress. But those who cultivate emotional discipline are able to process those feelings without letting them take over. They return to their purpose, ground themselves in long-term vision, and make choices based not on how they feel in the moment, but on where they want to go. This ability to regulate emotion in pursuit of something greater is what defines champions across every field. Emotions are temporary by nature. They rise in response to a situation, peak in intensity, and eventually pass. Yet in the heat of those emotional moments, it can feel as though the feeling will last forever. Anger surges and demands action. Fear whispers that the danger is permanent. Sadness clouds the mind with a sense of hopelessness. When a person acts based solely on these momentary emotional states, they risk making decisions that carry long-term consequences that often outlive the emotion itself. Temporary emotions, when allowed to dictate permanent actions, become the silent architects of regret. A single moment of anger can lead someone to destroy a relationship that took years to build. One wave of fear can cause a person to walk away from a life-changing opportunity. An impulse to seek relief from emotional discomfort can result in decisions that sabotage progress and compromise personal values. These actions feel justified in the moment because emotion narrows perception. It focuses attention on immediate relief rather than future impact. It encourages short-term thinking over long-term wisdom. But once the emotion fades and the clarity returns, the consequences remain. Often, that's when remorse begins to set in, when someone realizes they let a fleeting feeling write a chapter of their life they never intended. People often underestimate just how much their decisions are colored by mood. When they're in a good emotional state, the world seems full of opportunity. Problems feel manageable, and others seem more trustworthy. In a low emotional state, the same world appears threatening, limited, and overwhelming. This shifting lens affects how situations are interpreted and how decisions are made. Without emotional awareness, a person might take drastic action during a temporary emotional dip, unaware that their perception is distorted. They might quit a job they love because of one hard day. They might end a meaningful relationship after one misunderstanding. These decisions are not made from a place of reflection. They are made in reaction to internal turbulence. Developing the ability to wait, to not act on the first emotional impulse, is a mark of emotional intelligence. It allows space for clarity. It creates the distance needed to assess whether a decision aligns with long-term goals and values. This does not mean emotions should be ignored or invalidated. Every feeling carries useful information. Anger might point to a boundary that was crossed. Fear might highlight an area that needs preparation. Sadness might indicate the need for rest or healing. But none of these signals require immediate drastic action. They require interpretation, not obedience. In the pause between emotion and action lies personal power. That pause is where reasoning can be invited in, where consequences can be considered, and where values can be remembered. Acting during that pause ensures that decisions are made from a place of choice rather than compulsion. It allows for alignment between inner truth and external behavior. The more often a person makes space between feeling and action, the stronger their ability becomes to navigate life with integrity and purpose. The ability to pause, breathe, and reflect in the midst of an emotional surge is one of the most valuable skills a person can develop. Emotions arrive quickly and often with great force. They can take over the body, tighten the chest, quicken the breath, and flood the mind with urgent thoughts. In these moments, the temptation is to react, to say something sharp, make a rash decision, or shut down entirely. But when a person learns to step back instead of leaning in, to observe instead of react, they create space between stimulus and response. And in that space lies the opportunity for clarity, intention, and choice. Pausing does not mean repressing emotion. It means acknowledging its presence without allowing it to dictate behavior. It is a moment of conscious interruption, a way to break the automatic loop that so often leads people to act in ways they later regret. A single breath can be enough to ground the body and interrupt the intensity of the emotion. It doesn't erase the feeling, but it slows the pace, giving the mind a chance to catch up. This small act of self-awareness is a quiet but powerful declaration. I am not my emotion, and I do not have to be controlled by it. Reflection is the next step. It involves asking questions. What am I feeling right now? Why is this emotion showing up? Is it based on fact? Or is it being amplified by assumption, insecurity, or past experience? By asking these questions, a person can begin to separate the emotion from the story they're telling themselves about it. For example, anger might be pointing to a perceived injustice, but it's possible the situation was a misunderstanding. Anxiety might be highlighting uncertainty, but reflection can reveal that the fear is rooted more in imagined scenarios than in actual threat. This process requires practice and patience. The mind naturally resists slowing down, especially when emotions are heightened. But the more a person engages in this practice, the easier it becomes to access that pause in real time. Over time, emotional self-awareness becomes a habit. The breath becomes a reflex. The questions come more naturally. And as this capacity grows, so does emotional resilience. A person is no longer easily thrown off course by every disagreement. every bad day, or every internal storm. They become more rooted in themselves, less reactive to others, and more capable of making decisions that align with their values rather than their moods. Learning to sit with emotion rather than being swept away by it builds confidence. It reinforces the truth that while emotions are strong, they are not absolute. They can be felt without being followed. They can be respected without being obeyed. This mindset allows for deeper understanding, not just of oneself, but of others as well. When someone becomes less reactive to their own emotions, they also become less reactive to the emotions of those around them. They can listen without defending, observe without judging, and respond with empathy instead of resistance. Controlling emotions does not mean suppressing them or pretending they don't exist. In fact, the attempt to push emotions down or deny their presence often makes them stronger, leading to internal pressure that eventually explodes in ways that are unpredictable and harmful. Emotional control is not the same as emotional repression. To control emotions means to understand them, to interpret their message, and to guide their expression in a way that serves rather than sabotages. It is about learning to ride the emotional wave rather than being drowned by it, directing the energy behind the feeling instead of being pulled in every direction it wants to go. Every emotion has a function. Anger points to injustice. Fear signals potential danger or the unknown. Sadness reflects loss or unmet needs. Joy and excitement reveal alignment and fulfillment. To deny these feelings is to deny part of the human experience. But when emotions are left unmanaged, they can become disruptive forces. Anger can turn into aggression, fear can become paralysis, sadness can spiral into despair. On the other hand, when emotions are acknowledged, processed, and expressed thoughtfully, they become sources of information and strength. They deepen awareness, strengthen relationships, and clarify priorities. Learning to control emotions begins with the willingness to feel them without being consumed. It requires creating space between the feeling and the response. That space is where the emotional energy can be redirected towards something constructive. For example, instead of yelling in anger, one can channel that energy into having a clear, direct conversation that resolves a problem. Instead of retreating into fear, one can use it as a signal to prepare better or gather more information. This redirection transforms emotion from a barrier into a tool for growth and action. The key is to stay connected to emotions without becoming dominated by them. This balance is cultivated through practices like mindfulness, journaling, reflective thinking, and open dialogue. These tools help individuals identify what they're truly feeling and why. Often, what appears as anger is really hurt. What looks like indifference may be fear of rejection. Emotional control invites a deeper level of honesty with oneself, which then allows for more authentic and meaningful responses to life's challenges. It's not about controlling the feeling itself, but guiding its expression in a way that is intentional and aligned with one's values. In relationships, emotional control fosters safety and trust. When someone consistently manages their emotions with awareness, others feel more secure around them. They know that communication won't be hijacked by explosive reactions or cold detachment. They can engage without walking on eggshells or fearing volatility. This emotional steadiness enhances connection because it allows for vulnerability without the threat of instability. It also strengthens one's ability to hold space for others, to listen deeply without being triggered or overwhelmed by another person's emotional state. By developing the skill of understanding and channeling emotion, individuals build inner stability. They become people who respond with intention instead of reacting from habit. This maturity empowers them to face complex situations with grace and to navigate life's inevitable emotional terrain with clarity, strength, and purpose. Mastering emotions is not about denying human nature. It's about rising to the highest level of it. Emotions are part of what make us human, but they do not have to define our character or direct our destiny. True freedom begins when an individual recognizes that while they may not control everything they feel, they can absolutely control how they choose to respond. That control is the beginning of true strength, the quiet confidence that does not depend on circumstances, but is built from within. When someone no longer reacts out of impulse or insecurity, they begin to operate from a place of wisdom and intentionality, which brings peace both internally and externally. Freedom from emotional slavery begins the moment a person stops outsourcing their sense of balance to people, moods, or external conditions. Instead of being tossed around by every insult, every disappointment, every piece of unexpected news, they begin to hold their ground. This steadiness allows for thoughtful choices even in chaotic situations. It gives a person the ability to respond with calm when provoked, to choose grace over retaliation, and to stay grounded when fear or anger tempt them to lash out. In this space of emotional mastery, the mind becomes clearer, decisions become better, and the soul finds rest. This freedom is not something that comes all at once. It is developed over time through consistent effort and reflection. Every time a person chooses not to react immediately, every time they take a breath before speaking, every time they step back to observe rather than attack, they are reclaiming control. That control builds strength, not the kind of strength that needs to dominate others, but the kind that governs the self. This is the strength of a leader, of a mature soul, of someone who no longer fears their emotions, but understands their purpose. Emotional mastery also brings peace because it removes the chaos of constant internal conflict. When someone is ruled by their feelings, they often feel at war with themselves. They may regret their actions, but feel unable to stop repeating them. They may want calm, but find themselves triggered again and again. But as they begin to control their reactions, they begin to experience alignment. What they believe, how they feel, and what they do begin to fall into harmony. This inner coherence creates a sense of peace that cannot be given or taken away by others. It becomes a way of living. Living from this place of emotional freedom does not mean becoming numb or distant. On the contrary, it makes a person more present, more connected, and more capable of love, empathy, and understanding. It means they can engage with the world fully without being overwhelmed by it. They can care deeply without being consumed. They can grieve without being broken. They can celebrate without becoming careless. Emotional control allows them to fully experience life in all its richness without being enslaved by the ups and downs that come with it. Through this mastery, life becomes more intentional, more balanced, and ultimately more fulfilling.